Hello. Hi, my name is Epino, and this is my presentation on why jazz should be taught in all public schools. So before we get started, I want to talk about how music affects students in an academic setting, and this is music in general, not just jazz. Research has shown that being in a music program can cause students to have better scores, attendance rates, graduation rates, help with self-identity, and teaches life skills. An example of this is a quote about studies that have been done saying that schools with music programs have an estimated 90.2% graduation rate and 93.9% attendance rate compared to schools without music education, which average 72.9% graduation and 84.9% attendance. Schools that have music programs have an attendance rate of 93.3% compared to 84.9% in schools without music programs. This was a study done by Children's Music Workshop, and this is just showing attendance rates and graduation rates. If we're talking about scores done for like SATs, ACTs, there's a quote that states, analysis showed that students engaged in music programs outperformed their peers on every indicator: grade point average, graduation rate, ACT scores, attendance, and discipline referrals. Overall, the study demonstrates that the more a student participates in music, the more positive these benefits become. This was said by the School of Music director, Christopher Johnson. This was back in 2012, where they analyzed data from a high school for 4 years, just for the overall effects of students. So this is just talking about academic results with a student being in a program. And this is because when a student is in a music program, they have to be thinking about more than just themselves. So this is teaching them life skills such as responsibility, along with punctuality, making sure you're on time, hard work. And an example about this, and a great quote by Wynton Marsalis, who is an amazing jazz trumpet player, is, "In jazz, you're always put in a position to make responsible choices. How loud are you going to play? How are you going to balance in the section? When it's time for solo, who's going to solo? How long are you going to solo? How will you correct a mistake?" And this is just showing that the overall effect of a music program is good for a student. It teaches them life skills. It teaches them, like his quote described, responsibility. So this is why you should have a music program in a public school in general. Now I'm going to be going into why it should be a jazz program. So why jazz? 1, it's more appealing, recognizable to students. 2, it's more accessible and equitable than classical music. And 3, it adds more diversity to music programs. So this next slide, I'm going to be talking about jazz that is seen in today's media, and this is just in the background of things. So this isn't focused on jazz, but this is where students may have seen or heard jazz before. So I'm going to play some audio clips. This first one is from Avengers Endgame at the very end of the movie. Oops. So for some reason, my clips aren't showing on screen, but you can hear the audio of it. And as you can hear, that is a jazz band. That is Harry James and his orchestra playing "It's Been a Long, Long Time." So like I said, this is just a movie that came out back in 2019, and jazz isn't the center of it, but because of things like this, students can hear jazz on a day-to-day basis and have it be more recognizable. Versus classical music isn't typically something a student would listen to. Another example of jazz showing up in media is a Monsters Inc. theme. I'll play a little bit of it again. Oops. So that was just an example of jazz showing up in a movie. So, like I said, it's more recognizable in a student. I think clips are. Oops. There you go. So that was just an example of how jazz can be seen in media in the background. Now here's an example of how people have been creating their own jazz by using things that students may hear in everyday life. So the first example I have is of the song Stacy's Mom, but this is a 1930s version. This is by Stacy, can I come over after school? So like I said, that's just an example of Stacy's Mom. This is Scott Bradley's postmodern jukebox. That's a group he created, and the point of this group is to turn modern day music into jazz music and older versions of music. And it's a great gateway to get kids to start listening to jazz, and it's just a great way to show how there's a connection between today's style of music and jazz. Another example I have here is the 8-Bit Band, and this is Rosalina in the Observatory. So this is actually a song from a video game. This is from the Super Mario Galaxy, and this is just an example of how groups have turned music that kids love into jazz. So both of these examples are songs that people can be hearing in passing, like on the radio, and or playing video games. Along with the two examples in the last slide, this just all shows how these are all examples that students have heard before, and this connection to jazz can help a student and make them more likely to learn an instrument versus when you usually play classical music as a student, you're playing it because it's the music put in front of you, versus this can be a gateway to get somebody into playing music. My last example for this is how media focuses on jazz. In the past few years, we've seen an increase in movies that are focused on jazz. So unlike the past two slides, this isn't music that you're hearing in the background or music that happens to be here. This is jazz-centered films. So this includes La La Land, Pixar's Soul, Whiplash, Princess and the Frog. And the whole point of this is because all these examples are what makes jazz more recognizable and appealing to students. So since they're hearing it, since they're seeing it, they're more likely to want to play an instrument because of these factors, and it just opens up the number of students who would be more likely to join this program. So the next part is, we already talked about why there should be a music program, about how jazz gets more students into these programs because it's more recognizable to them. So why jazz? And a big part about jazz is how it's very accessible and equitable. compared to classical music. So an example of this is jazz has two types of ensembles, and this is big bands or jazz combos. So jazz combos consist of a rhythm section, which is usually bass, drums, and a chord player, so either guitar or piano, and maybe a horn player. So the reason why I say usually is because you don't need these instruments. So if a student wants to learn how to play jazz violin, they're able to. If a student wants to play jazz flute, they're able to. This is very different compared to classical music, because in classical music, you need to fill these exact parts. So if I am in orchestra, I need to be playing, okay, I need three violinists at least for violin 1, 2, and 3. That isn't an issue when it comes to jazz. You're able to make music and you're able to create with only a few students. This is great for low income schools, especially because you're not able to pick and choose what students are coming to you. So it's great to make the best out of it. The next part of this is of its equitability is all you need are ears and an instrument. So jazz was done by ear in the past, meaning that sheet music is essential for a jazz program. Learning tunes by ear is part of history, and it can help students express themselves. So all this means is with a classical program, you need to make sure that you have sheet music for the students to play so that they have materials for them to play, versus with jazz, turning on the radio and playing along and figuring out the music to play by ear isn't only common, it's actually encouraged to do that with a program. And then my next part is that jazz is an outlet for expression that low income students may not have. So first of all, I'm talking about equitability because it's important to have jazz in every single public school, not just schools that can afford it. That's the whole point of why it should be jazz, not classical music. So that being said, having a program that's free like GarageBand on a MacBook, or having electronic music played on a computer that's checked out by the school is much more likely than convincing a student and their parents to spend this money on an instrument that their child might continue playing. So this makes it a lot more accessible because you're not having to go to the music store and purchase all of these things. All you really need are your ears and an instrument. So my last point is jazz adds much needed diversity to the curriculum. Classical music lacks diversity and tends to only play music by white male musicians. So this is the Bach, Mozart's, Beethoven's. This is music that has been played for decades, and there's nothing wrong with it, other than the fact there's nothing wrong with those musicians, but there are so many more musicians that aren't being represented. Jazz brings a lot of this representation. So whether it's players like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Mary Lou Williams, these are all amazing. These are all amazing instrumentalists, and these are all amazing performers who are also people of color, and these are also some including women. So a great quote, it says, and this is research done by the League of American Orchestras, says, despite the enormous influence of musicians of color on nearly every genre of music, the classical music field remains starkly white and Asian. In 1996, Black and Latinx musicians comprised 1% of American orchestras. Today, their ranks have increased to just 4%. This was written in 2020. So the fact that it's only increased 3% in the past 25-ish years is really concerning. So what jazz does is it adds diversity to the canon, because this music is African American music, and a majority of the artists are African American, Black, and there's also a lot of diversity when it comes to women in music. Another quote about this states, jazz music and culture have experienced a surge in popularity after the passage of the Jazz Preservation Act, JPA, in 1987. This resolution defined jazz as a Black American art form, thus using race, national identity, and culture value as key aspects in making jazz one of the nation's most subsidized arts. This is a quote by Jeff Farley, and this is just talking about how this is a Black American art form. There are not very many American art forms that are truly American, so I think it's very important to conserve this part of history and add diversity into these programs for music. I also talk about how it's not only diversifying with race, it's also adding more women in jazz, more women into the music scene. So women in jazz also help diversify this music. An example is the Diva Jazz Orchestra, founded in 1992. On the bottom right picture is a picture of them, and this is a program that is a big band, and there's also a combo now, and it's all women playing jazz music. And having these people and having them be seen is important for the music scene, because it shows students and it shows people younger that there are people that like them, and that it isn't impossible for them to be able to do this, that they don't have to meet a certain criteria to play this type of music. So I'm going to go back to, sorry. I'm going to go back to this slide right here. And to recap, why jazz? Having a music program in general does great things for the students academically. It's going to give them a reason to show up, because a lot of the times these students identify with this music. It's not just something that they kind of enjoy. It's something that they truly lean into. They identify as a musician. This is something that they look forward to and show up for. And because of this, they're also showing up in school. So having a music program in general helps the school system, and that's why it should be in every public school. Now, why jazz? Like I explained, my first point being it's more appealing, recognizable to students. These students who are playing video games, these students who are watching movies, they hear this music, they enjoy this music. They don't know it's jazz unless you tell them it's jazz. So when people are saying things like, oh, I love Monsters Inc., I love that theme song, that's really jazz. So because of this, a student is more likely to be like, oh man, I want to be in the jazz program. I want to be able to play this music. Then, oh, I want to be in the music program. I want to play classical music, because classical music isn't something that they're hearing in the media constantly, versus jazz is something that's recognizable to them. My second point was that it is more accessible and equitable than classical music. Like I explained, the equitability comes from the fact that you don't need you don't need the most expensive instrument. You don't even need an instrument. You can really do this with an electronic, with just a computer, and you can do this electronically. But the whole point is, you're able to play this music no matter how much money you have, because you just need something to play and you need your ears. This makes it a lot more accessible to musicians of all economic statuses. And then my last point was the fact that this adds more diversity to music programs. So as I explained, there has only been a 3% increase in music played by people of color in American orchestras, while jazz is primarily African American music, and not even primarily, it's registered as a Black American art form. So adding this into schools would be great, and it would help diversify everything. Yeah, so that's why I think that jazz should be taught in all public schools, because all these benefits, such as test scores, graduation rate, attendance, and overall just helping shape the future generations. Thank you.